This happened not too long ago. Several weeks back, I went to Chick-fil-A one night. I was going there to pick up some food and bring it back home. It was a little bit later because I had just recently gotten off of work. So I parked my car in the parking lot of Chick-fil-A and started to walk to the building. Even though it was a little bit later, I was still surprised at how quiet things seemed. Chick-fil-A usually seems to be busy almost right up until the time they close. So as I was making my way to the front doors, I noticed an employee standing right next to them. It was a man who was young looking, maybe in his 20s. He was skinny and had dark hair, but was wearing a Chick-fil-A hat, as well as the rest of the uniform. As I approached the door, he then stood in front of it and said, "Excuse me," to me. I stopped and looked at the man and asked him what he wanted. He said that he really needed a ride and was wondering if I could give him one. I was very confused by this request. I said no, I could not give him a ride. The man did not say anything and just kept standing there. I had to walk around him to go inside of the building. When I had made it inside, I heard the man starting to walk in after me. But then he just kind of stood near the front doors of the building while I walked over to the counter. I ordered the food that I wanted, but as I was doing so, the employee at the counter told me something. She pointed over to the man who had asked me for a ride. He was still standing by the door. She said that he didn't work here, but had been hanging out around the place for hours and talking to customers. She said she wanted to let me know. I was also told that they thought he had left. I remember that as we were looking over at him, the man then walked back over to the doors and left the building. This was strange, and I didn't really know what to make of it. After ordering, I waited around for a short time before the food was done. Then I took it and walked out to leave. After making it out of the building and into the quiet parking lot, I headed for my car. But I soon realized that the same man was standing around right outside of my vehicle. I stopped about 10 feet away from it as the man stood in front of my driver's door. He once again asked me for a ride. The guy seemed really sketchy, to say the least. There was no way that I was going to be giving him a ride anywhere. I said no again, but he didn't move from my car. I really didn't know what else to do in the moment, so I started walking back to the Chick-fil-A. I went back inside of it and then into the lobby. But just moments after I got inside, I heard the door opening. I looked back and saw the man was going in. He started to walk over to me, and the restaurant was basically just us two. The employee at the counter told the man that he needed to leave. I remember at that point, he shouted a couple of curse words at the employee, but then he actually did turn and leave the building. It was very strange. I waited inside of the restaurant for about a minute before walking over to the window. I wanted to see if the guy was at my car again. When I walked over and looked, I noticed that he was in fact at my car. He was kind of standing around near the driver's door again. I watched him try to open my driver's door, but thankfully my car was locked. After trying my back door as well, the man then kind of walked away in another direction. I watched him start to go near another vehicle parked a ways away. At that point, I knew that I could get to my car. I left the Chick-fil-A and just about sprinted for my vehicle. I got inside and then immediately left and drove away. Once I did, I called the police and reported the guy. I'm not sure how the situation was handled, but I never heard anything more. It's kind of crazy looking back that the man was wearing a full Chick-fil-A uniform but didn't even work there. I'm not sure if he was a disgruntled former employee or just got the uniform online or something, but it seems as though he was just walking around and causing problems. My name is Caroline, and I used to work at a Chick-fil-A when I was in high school. This was several years ago, and I did not mind the job. Mostly, I would work behind the counter and take customers' orders. I worked there for 6 months, till something made me quit. The story gradually happened over time. I'm not sure when exactly it started, but basically there was this one creepy guy that would always come in. The first time I noticed him was when he was ordering and called me by my name. Now, I do have a name tag, but most customers don't do that. I dealt with so many customers on a daily basis though, that I wouldn't remember most of them. So this guy might have been there before, maybe not. But several days later probably, the guy came in again and also mentioned my name that time. He complimented me on my appearance both times also. Nothing was that creepy about those experiences though. But the next time is when I started to get uncomfortable. I remember he came in when we were really busy. When he got to the front of the line, he said that he didn't want to order anything, but just wanted to look at me. I was a little weirded out by this. I just said thanks, not knowing what else to say. He asked me how I was doing and if I had plans after work. I just played it off by saying that I was good and that I was really busy for the rest of the day. It was strange because there were a lot of people there in line behind him. Finally, the man left. Now, after that, he did come in a couple more times and had similar behavior. I was a little creeped out by him at this point, also because of the fact that he was much older than I was. Because keep in mind, I was 17 at the time and this man was at least in his 50s. So, after working one night, I remember that I got off and went to my car in the parking lot. When I did, I noticed a car parked sort of across from me. The man was sitting in the driver's seat of this car and kind of looking in my direction. I quickly looked away and started my car and then left. He didn't seem to follow me or anything, but I found that really strange. I mean, he hadn't gone into the restaurant, and it didn't seem like he was going to either. I wondered if he was just trying to watch me or something. After that encounter, I probably didn't see him for a week or two. The next time, though, it was even worse. I remember that I had worked another night shift. Being a high school student, I was a part-time worker and often worked after school until like 9 or 10 at night. So after getting off of work, I drove home to my parents' house where I lived. When I got onto our street, I noticed a car parked in front of our house. This was unusual. After getting into the driveway, I looked over at the car. I didn't have a good view, but it looked like that same guy was in the driver's seat. Now this really creeped me out. I got out of my car to go inside. As soon as I did, the car that the man was in drove away. I went inside after that, and he did not return. The next time that I worked though, I told several of my coworkers about him. They all seemed concerned, and said that they would keep an eye out for the man in case he came in. Well, for probably at least another week after that, I did not see the guy. Then, I was working one Saturday morning into the afternoon. I think I got off at like 6 p.m. My parents and siblings had all gone to something earlier in the day. Unfortunately, I couldn't go because I was working. So when I got home from work that night, I would be all by myself for several hours. I remember that probably at like 8 p.m. it was dark out and I was in the living room. Then there was a knock at the front door. From where I was, I could not see the door, so I got up to look. I checked out the front living room window and saw the same guy standing at the front door. I was extremely creeped out by this, and I stayed where I was. The man knocked on the door again, but I didn't move. Then he started walking around to the back of the house. As soon as he did that, I called the police. Then I ran to my bedroom and locked myself in the closet. When I was hiding in there, I did not hear any more noises. After what felt like a long time, the police arrived. To my surprise, the man was still there. The police found him in the backyard, and I was really happy that they had caught him. I ended up having to get a restraining order against the guy. I also quit my job at Chick-fil-A. The man got banned from our location, but I still didn't want to work there, and decided to just focus on school. I still think back to that crazy experience all the time. This happened 3 years ago. It was a nice summer night, and I went to Chick-fil-A with a good friend. When we got there, it was a little bit later, so not as many other customers were around. We went inside and ordered food, but then went outside to eat on the little patio that they had at the Chick-fil-A. There were a number of tables set up outside, and it was such a nice evening that we both went out there. The Chick-fil-A was located in the same type of area that most of them are. It was located off a road with many other businesses, such as stores and restaurants. But this Chick-fil-A was basically on the very end of the shopping area, because after the patio where we sat was a parking lot. Then there was this little wall of pavers about 5 or 6 feet high, and above it was a pretty dense woods. That was basically the end of the commercial area and led to more wild and residential properties. So anyways, we were both sitting there eating and talking to each other. Neither of us were facing the woods, but it would have been to my left and to my friend's right. I remember though, looking over and noticing something in the woods. It was dark, so I couldn't really tell, but as I kept watching, I soon realized that there was a man there. Some guy was standing mostly behind a tree, above the paver wall in the woods, and he was looking right at us. This was bizarre to say the least. My friend and I talked about it briefly, and wondered who the guy was and what he was doing. Soon enough though, we looked back and he was gone. We continued our conversation, but several minutes later we noticed the man again. He returned to the same position that he was in before. This was maybe 5 minutes after we had first seen him, but once more he left and was only there for like 30 seconds. For the next 10 minutes, neither of us noticed him. Then he was back again for a third time. This time, he stayed there longer. He watched us from the woods for well over a minute, maybe 2 or 3. We both thought that this was pretty weird. Once more though, he eventually moved away and went back into the woods. For the rest of the time that we were sitting there and eating, he was not visible. Eventually, we got up to leave. My friend and I walked to our cars in the parking lot, said bye to each other, and then got into our vehicles. After getting into my car, my friend drove off, and I checked a few things on my phone. Now, I was not parked that particularly close to the woods, but I could see it decently. I remember that after being in my car for about a minute, I looked up and saw the guy in the woods again. This time, he emerged from the woods and jumped down from the wall of pavers. Then he actually started running over to my car. I scrambled to put the car into drive. After the man reached my car though, he tried opening up the passenger side door. Just moments later, I was able to drive off and leave the scene. After making it safely out of the parking lot, the man did not chase after me. Still, I called the police and I let them know about what had happened. It was just too bizarre. After it happened, I did not go back to that Chick-fil-A for a while. I'm still not sure who exactly that guy was and what he was doing in the woods. This is something that happened back when I was a kid. I was 7 years old and went to Chick-fil-A one time with my parents and younger sister. Now, this Chick-fil-A, I remember, had a play place in the back of it. We sat down at a random booth in the restaurant because it was very busy. I remember that after a while, I asked my parents if I could go to the play place. They said yes and remained with my little sister in the booth. When I got inside of the play place, I noticed that nobody else was in there at all. I didn't mind. In fact, I preferred it this way. I started climbing on the obstacles, and it wasn't as good as some of the McDonald's play places that I had been to, but it was still pretty decent. After being there for probably 20 minutes if I had to guess, I was still by myself. I may have lost track of time a little bit, but I really don't remember. The next thing I knew, a man entered the play place area. I just know that he called out to me and said that I needed to go. I was confused at first because I didn't know this guy. He also was not a Chick-fil-A employee, but just some random man. He then told me that my parents had left and I had to go now before they drove away. This got my attention. For some reason, I believed the guy. I thought that my parents might actually be leaving and I was afraid to be left there. So I instantly got down from where I was and walked over to the guy. Now, there was actually an exit door in the play place area, but I'm guessing it was rarely used. The guy opened the door and grabbed my wrist and led me outside. We started walking around the building through the parking lot. We were going very fast, and I remember that the man started walking over to the parking lot next door, which was another business. I don't remember exactly what it was. As we were quickly walking to the parking lot of the other business, I looked into the Chick-fil-A parking lot. That's when I noticed my parents' car was still there. and it also appeared to be empty. That would mean that they had not left Chick-fil-A after all. When I saw this, I kind of slowed down. I remember the man tugging on my arm to move faster. He said that we had to hurry. I didn't move faster though. At that point, I remember that I stopped completely. I wanted to get away from the man and run back to the Chick-fil-A, but I couldn't. I started trying to move my arm away, but the man's grip was strong around my wrist. I was also wearing my winter jacket, and when I was trying to move my hand away, it sort of worked. I got my wrist free of him, but the man was still grabbing onto the end of my coat sleeve. So at that point, I quickly moved my arm back, causing the sleeve to come off. The man tried pulling it, but this basically just made my jacket fall off entirely. I then tugged away and was finally able to break free from the man. Then I ran as fast as I could away from him. He did not chase after me. I got back inside Chick-fil-A and ran to my parents. I told them about the guy, and the police were called. I don't remember much else after that. Obviously, I'm very grateful that I got away. I feel dumb for not questioning the man immediately, but I was very young. Hopefully, the man was caught. This is something that happened back when I used to work at a Chick-fil-A. I would say it was about 5 years ago now. I worked there for only a few months. The job was pretty good, and my coworkers were very nice. One time, I was working a closing shift. I remember that with a few hours left, things had finally started to quiet down. I went out and was told to sweep around the restaurant. I would help to clean tables around the dining room as well. We were constantly making sure that the restaurant was in good order for the customers. So I went around and only a few people were scattered around the restaurant here and there eating. Maybe a total of like 4 people were sitting down. I remember going towards the very back corner, and there was this man sitting in a booth. He looked kind of mysterious because his head was down, but he wasn't sleeping. He was also wearing all black and had a hood covering most of his face. I didn't really think too much about it though. After sweeping the floors, I went to go do something else. Sometime later, I went back to clean some of the tables, so I was in that same general area. I noticed that every single person was gone now, except for the man. He was still in the same place. So I cleaned and then went back. The next time that I returned to the dining room area was when we closed at 10 p.m. I went out into that area and noticed that the man was still there. He would have to leave now. I walked up to him and told him that we were closing. The man did not respond to me or even acknowledge me. I spoke louder and once again said that we were closed and added that he would have to leave now. After a few seconds of silence, I was getting nervous. Then the man turned and said no to me very loudly. I didn't know what to do. I just said, "But we're closed." The man then stood up and just looked at me. He was a large man and much taller than I was. I just walked back over to the counter to tell a coworker. I found my coworker Brian and let him know about the situation. Then we both walked back over to the man. He was sitting down at the table again the same way that he had been for hours. After approaching, we both told him once more that he had to leave. The man ignored us at first. Brian then threatened to call the police on him. The man then stood up and looked right at Brian. Then he loudly said, "Go ahead, skinny boy." I specifically remember him calling Brian a skinny boy. Brian asked the guy what his problem was. The man's response was to walk over and take the little flower decoration that we had at the table. We had flowers in small vases at many of the tables or booths. After picking it up, the man then slammed the vase down on the floor, breaking it. Brian told me to follow him, and we both quickly went to the other side of the restaurant. We knew at this point that the man was dangerous. I remember the guy yelled something at us as we were moving away. We found the 2 other coworkers that were in the back and told them what was happening. We all then decided to leave the restaurant for our own safety. Then we called the police. We went to our vehicles and waited, and the man remained inside of the restaurant. The police got there very quickly and went inside. We couldn't tell what was going on, but about 20 minutes later, they came out of the restaurant with the man. Apparently, he did not respond to officers' orders. He tried tackling a police officer after he was approached, and it took 3 officers to bring him down. Eventually, though, he was apprehended and taken away. We went back inside and finished up our closing duties. The restaurant was not really damaged or anything from the man's rampage, just a few things scattered around. That certainly made for my scariest experience working at Chick-fil-A, though. This is something that happened last summer. It was a weekend, and I was at Chick-fil-A with my friend Sean. We went golfing together in the morning and were eating afterwards. The Chick-fil-A restaurant was not very far from where either of us lived, and it was on the way back from the golf course. Inside, things were very busy with it being a weekend. We were sitting at a table kind of in the back of the restaurant. During the time that we were in there, something caught my eye. There was a woman who was sitting at a table in my line of vision, kind of to the right. She was a ways back, but she was just staring at me. And the way that she was staring was somewhat creepy. It wasn't like somebody who maybe thought they recognized me. It was more like she was mad at me and glaring right at my face. We made eye contact for a split second, and I had to look away. I looked back a short time later, and she was doing the same thing. I was positive that I did not recognize her, and I didn't know who she was, so this was really strange. The woman was thin, had dark brown hair, and was maybe in her 40s. I did my best to just ignore her and talk to my friend John. John and I were good friends and could talk for a long time about anything. We stayed there for sort of a long time, long after we were done eating. After a while, I happened to look around and noticed that the woman was still there. She was staring at me once again. Now, she wasn't staring at me non-stop the entire time. She would look around at other stuff too, but would often look back to me. I was still just trying to ignore her. Finally, me and John decided to leave. We got up and walked to the exit. I didn't even think about the woman at all anymore. I figured that I would be gone and probably not see her again. John and I said bye to each other and then got into our vehicles. We had drove there separately and parked away from each other as well. We would have parked next to each other, but the parking lot was so full when we arrived that there were only a few open spaces. So after I got inside my car, I started the engine and noticed the woman again. She was walking through the parking lot and looking at me. Then she headed into my direction. I was really curious as to what she was doing, so I didn't just drive away. Eventually, she made it to my car, and I rolled my window down. Right when she got close to my car, she asked me if I could give her a ride. I told her sorry, but no. Without saying anything back, the woman flipped me off and then started walking away angrily. I was more confused than ever. At that point, I just decided to drive away. I left the Chick-fil-A and headed back to my apartment. I lived only about 5 to 10 minutes away from there, depending on traffic. The drive back home went smooth, and I went inside and put my golf clubs away. Now, my apartment is on the 2nd floor of my building. It overlooks the main parking lot for the complex, and there's another building across from it. I was casually walking past my window when I noticed something. There was a car in one of the parking spaces and a woman in the driver's seat. I looked closer and saw it was the same woman from Chick-fil-A. What was her deal? She was not looking at me and appeared to be looking at her phone. I got out of her view from the window. I kept a watch on her though. She remained there for almost 30 minutes. Then she finally drove away. I don't know why she was there, but I believe that she followed me home. I hadn't noticed at all, but I wasn't really paying that close of attention. My apartment complex is in a somewhat busy area, and cars entering behind me is very common. Luckily, I don't think she knew which apartment was mine. I park in an underground garage that's under the building. The woman had just parked in the lot. Ever since then, I haven't seen her. I still have a lot of questions about that, but I'm just glad that everything is okay. I used to work at a Chick-fil-A. The job was just temporary for me and during the summer, but I had a terrifying experience that caused me to quit early. It all happened one seemingly normal Thursday evening. During this time, I was bringing food to customers, mainly ones that were waiting in the parking lot. We had a couple of parking spaces dedicated to people who ordered online. After a while of doing this, I had an order to bring out that was pretty average. I think it was just a number 1 meal, which is the regular chicken sandwich, fries, and a drink. I brought it out to a newer looking minivan that was parked in one of the spaces. I went to the driver's window and saw that a man was inside. He was a larger guy, had a mustache, and was wearing a jacket and sunglasses. When I was at his window, he rolled it down a little bit, but not enough for me to hand him his order. I confirmed his name for the order, and he said yes, but then he asked me if I could please put it in the back seat of his van for him. He said that he recently injured his back and couldn't twist it yet. I was really confused at first, but noticed that he had a backpack and another bag on his passenger seat. Without giving it much thought, I just said yes. I didn't have a problem with it and didn't really care. The man then pushed a button which opened his side sliding door. When the door opened up, I noticed that the seat directly behind him was taken out completely. The only seat in the back was on the passenger side. As I looked in, the man told me that there was a cup holder next to the seat for the drink. I literally had to get inside of his van in order to put it there. I know this sounds really crazy, but at the time, it just seemed like a simple request. As soon as I had fully stepped inside of the vehicle, suddenly it started moving. The van jerked forward, and I realized that the man was actually driving away. The sudden movement set me falling backwards and into the third row of seating. My first thought was to get out of the car, but he was going so fast that I couldn't just jump out of it, and as soon as he started moving, the automatic door that was open started to close. The next thing I knew, we were out of the parking lot and onto a busier road. I got into one of the seats in the third row of the van and immediately reached for my phone. As soon as I did though, the man screamed at me that if I called anyone, he would crash the car at full speed. I didn't know anything about this guy, so I had to take his threat serious. I wanted to call the police badly though. I put my phone down, kind of behind me, and kind of sat on it, and told the man that I wouldn't call anybody. He didn't say anything after that. Honestly, I think I was too scared to ask him what he was doing, but I had no clue. I didn't say anything to him. As my phone was under me, I reached for it and felt it without looking. I kept my eyes on the man, and he was now driving at a more normal speed. He was mostly watching the road, but every now and then he would look back at me. I tried to feel around on my phone and memorize where the apps were to make a phone call. When the man wasn't looking, I snuck a quick peek for like half a second. I got to the dial screen and hit 911. Then I turned my volume all the way down so the guy wouldn't hear. I wasn't able to say anything after the call went through though. I kept a watch on the man, and every time that he looked back at me, I made sure that it didn't look like I was on my phone. I kept it behind me, and I remained looking ahead. A couple of minutes later, I checked and was still on the line with the police. I carefully hung up and then dialed again. I didn't want them to think that it was an accident that I called. Meanwhile, the man had driven us to a nearby freeway and then merged onto it. He didn't say anything at all, and I was just hoping that the police would know what to do. Probably about 10 minutes went by. We were still on the same freeway, and then I noticed a police car. It didn't have its sirens or lights on though. It was in the other lane and a ways back. Soon it changed into our lane. I had a great feeling when I saw that. I just had a feeling that it was going to pull us over. Then it turned its lights on. The man looked back and saw it. I was afraid that he was going to crash the car or something, but he didn't. He angrily asked me if I called the police as he started to slow down. I said no, I hadn't, in the most convincing way possible. The man then pulled over and told me not to say anything. I completely ignored him though. As soon as we were stopped and the police officer was walking towards us, I ran for the door. I opened it up and then left the vehicle. Looking back, that was possibly dangerous. I didn't know what the man would do, but thankfully, he didn't do anything. Instead, he tried to act all confused. I told the officer what was going on though, and judging by me wearing a Chick-fil-A uniform, he knew something was up. I waited in the police car while the officer talked with the man, and backup arrived. It became a huge thing with a bunch of officers showing up. They ended up arresting the man for kidnapping, and I was able to go home. I quit my job after that, just because I didn't want to go back to the Chick-fil-A after such a terrible experience. It was months before I even left the house by myself. I'm doing much better now though. I will never forget that horrifying experience. I worked at a Chick-fil-A for almost 2 years. I could tell you lots of stories about strange customers or weird situations, but there's one that always stands out from the rest and still baffles me today. I really can't believe that it happened, but it did. One time, I was working a shift where I started in the afternoon and got off at night. I think we closed at 10 or 11 p.m., and I got off on this night at 9. At about 7 p.m., things inside were very busy. I was at the counter taking orders, and there was a pretty steady line. At one point, a man with a slight beard came up to me to order. I asked him what he would like, and he said he wanted a number 2 deluxe meal. That's a spicy chicken sandwich for anybody wondering. So after he ordered it, I told him the price and said that he could pay now. The guy was like, "No thanks, I'll take it free." Surely he could not be serious. The way he said it though was not in a joking way. I said, "We can't give it to you for free, you'll have to pay, sorry." He seemed angry and said, "I heard you guys working here are supposed to be so nice. Why can't you just let me have it free then?" There was a line of people behind the guy, and he was starting to hold them up. I told the guy sorry, but he had to pay like everybody else. The guy simply said that he wasn't going to, and added that he didn't even bring his wallet. I told him that he couldn't get anything then. The man just kept standing there though. I asked the man to let other customers come up to order. He said, "I will leave when I get some free food." I really couldn't believe the nerve of this guy, and I didn't really know what to do anymore. I asked him nicely to please go, but he refused. People around him were wondering what was taking so long, and I noticed many of the people in line were staring. After a few minutes, a coworker came over to me, seeing that something was up. She then opened up another register so people in line could order there as well. The line was now backed up so far it almost went to the doors. When the second register opened up, the man finally walked away and left the restaurant. Things resumed back to normal after that. We kept 2 registers going for a while to deal with the line and keep things moving. Then it quieted down at about 8 p.m. But sometime around maybe 8:30, I was still working behind the counter when I noticed the man once more. He was actually outside and not in the building. I could see him clearly from where I was though. It was dark outside, but the guy was just kind of standing around near the doors. He wasn't really facing the restaurant though. I was afraid that he was going to come inside again and ask for something for free or cause more problems. He didn't though. I kept working, and several more people came in until 9 p.m. when I was finally off. Then I went back and clocked out and could leave. My car was parked in the parking lot, sort of on the side where I had seen the man before. I looked and saw that he was still out there, just standing around like he was before. I really didn't want to walk past him, especially after our confrontation earlier, so I decided to go out the other exit on the other side. After I left through those doors, I walked around the building and over to my car. Then I was finally able to drive home. That's the crazy experience that I had working there. One thing I still wonder though is why the guy was just standing around outside. I think maybe he was waiting for me to get off of work and confront me again or something. I don't know for sure, but I'm glad that I left through the other doors. One day, I went to Chick-fil-A with my best friend Lindsay. We were eating inside of the restaurant on a fairly busy day. There was a lot of people all over the place. It was just the 2 of us at one of the tables on one side. Everything was going normal, and Lindsay and I were talking. At one point, Lindsay got up to use the restroom. I stayed in my seat, and not long after Lindsay left, a man walked over and sat across from me. I really didn't know who he was. The man had short brown hair, a sort of uneven beard, and was fairly young looking. He said hi to me, and I asked him what he was doing here. The man said that he saw me and just wanted to get my phone number. I was not interested in giving it to him. He came across as a little bit strange to me. I told him no, I couldn't give it to him. He tried to reason with me and then asked me if he could have my Snap or Instagram. My answer was still no. Then I looked over and saw Lindsay coming back. Thank goodness. The man then got up and quickly walked away. Lindsay sat back down, and I told her about what had happened. I was kind of weirded out by the entire thing. I've been asked for my number before, but not like this. I thought that was the end of it though. We didn't really see the guy at all for the rest of the time that we were in there. I even looked around the restaurant wondering where he went. I figured that he just left, but the place was kind of busy, so I didn't know for sure. So when Lindsay and I left the Chick-fil-A, we began driving back. We both lived fairly close to each other, and we had gone there together in my car. When we were maybe about halfway back, Lindsay told me that the man was following us. I looked back and saw a car directly behind us with what appeared to be a man behind the wheel. I asked her if she was sure that that was him, and she said yes. I hadn't noticed him behind us at all up until that point. I kept driving, but we didn't have that much longer to go, maybe like 5 minutes. When we got closer, I knew that I couldn't just go to one of our houses and have the guy know where we lived. So instead of pulling onto my street, I drove past it and then turned on a random street. I kept on driving around the block and just turning again. I went around the block and then back to the busier road. When we merged back onto it, the guy suddenly sped up and started to go around us. He gave me the middle finger as he got even with us before speeding away. I could not believe what had happened. I guess he was so mad that I rejected him. I'm glad that he didn't keep following us all the way back to my house, and I hope that I never see him again. This is something that happened several years ago. It was late on a Saturday night. I was at Walmart doing some very late night shopping. This was not normally how I spend Saturday nights. I really don't remember why I was out so late on a Saturday night shopping at Walmart. What I do remember, though, was after I left Walmart, I walked out to my car in the parking lot. At the time, I drove a smaller pickup. It was very quiet out, and the parking lot was mostly empty. Now, the Walmart parking lot was massive. There were several stores next to the Walmart on both sides, and their parking lots connected. At the far back of the parking lot, there were a few quiet roads and several restaurants. They all connected with more of a main road a ways to the west. Just about everything was closed at this hour. After I left the Walmart, I was going to cut through the Chick-fil-A parking lot. It was sort of a shortcut, and instead of going to the left and having to drive all around it, I could just go right through it. I pulled into the parking lot and was driving very slow. But as I was driving through, I noticed something. There appeared to be a man walking by the Chick-fil-A. Just out of curiosity, I looked, because it was kind of strange to see this guy walking there. He was also wearing all black, with what looked like a ski mask over his face. He looked at me as I was looking at him. He stood near the restaurant, about 5 feet away from it. Now, I was going probably about 5 miles an hour or less, because there was a speed bump in the first part and the end part of the parking lot. I really couldn't help but look at the guy based on what he was wearing, but then I looked away and kept driving. However, I soon noticed that the man was approaching me. I looked and saw him jogging in my direction. I sped up, trying to get away from him. I had no clue as to why he would be running after me. When I made it to the end of the parking lot, I had to slow down a little bit for the speed bump, but I still ended up taking it faster than I should have. Then, when I was out of the parking lot and onto the road, I figured that I lost the guy, but just after I got back onto the road, I felt something hit the back of my truck. I looked back and saw the man literally jumping into the bed of my truck. I couldn't believe this was happening. The man must have ran pretty fast. I really don't know how he caught up to me so well. I was traveling at about probably 15 miles an hour at most. Now I know that's still slow, but this road right off the Chick-fil-A was very quiet and the speed limit was 20. So now the man was in the bed of my truck and I didn't know what to do. I kept on driving for a little while, sort of in disbelief. The man remained there and did not immediately try to do anything. Then, as I kept going, maybe 30 seconds later, he started knocking on the rear window. I decided to pull over to the side of the road at that point. I slowed down my truck, and as soon as I came to a stop, almost instantly, the man jumped out. He then went directly for my driver's window and took a punch at it. I slammed on the gas really quickly, and the guy started running after me again. This time, I floored it, and he was unable to jump back into the truck before I sped away. I got a safe distance from him and then called the police. I told them everything, and then I went home. I never heard anything more about it. I'm hoping that the police found him, but I'm really not sure. Looking back, I have no clue as to what the guy was doing. I have to imagine that he was dangerous and wanted to rob me or something. I'm just really glad that I got away from him. I'm a female, age 22, and a few years ago I used to work at a Chick-fil-A. It was my first ever job, and I lived with my parents in a neighborhood nearby. I would walk to and from work every day because it was only a 15-minute walk and I didn't have a car. Both of my parents used the only cars that we had, and part of the reason I was working there was to save enough money so that I could buy my own. I was part-time and would work all sorts of hours. Mainly, I would work in the afternoons and nights on weekdays and earlier on the weekends. On one night, probably 4 months or so after getting the job, I was working pretty late. I think I got off at like 10 p.m. and then I left the restaurant to walk home. This wasn't uncommon at all, and by now the restaurant and the area were pretty quiet. This particular Chick-fil-A was near a few larger stores and a couple of other restaurants. I would take the sidewalk to the residential area less than a mile away, and my house was back there. As I left that night and started to walk on the sidewalk, I saw this one guy that was standing out in the Chick-fil-A parking lot. Before I had started walking 10 feet, the guy began approaching me. I had never seen him before, and I didn't know what he wanted. I was still wearing my Chick-fil-A clothes, and I had clearly just left the building, so I thought maybe he had a question about Chick-fil-A. I guess that's what I was hoping, because I had a bad feeling. The man walked closer, and then he reached me. I was sort of nervous, but I tried to act calm. When he got to me, he said hi in a friendly tone. The man said that he had noticed that I walked home every day from work and told me that it could be dangerous to walk alone at night. He said that he wanted to walk me home. It seemed pretty weird to me. I told the guy that I was fine and I was capable of getting home by myself. I had walked home by myself countless times, many of them at night. He asked if I was sure, and I said yes. The guy seemed disappointed, but then sort of walked away off into the parking lot of a nearby grocery store. Then I started walking home. I kept an eye out, and the guy didn't follow me or anything. As I was walking, I realized just how weird of a situation it was. The guy said that he noticed me walking home every night. Had he been watching me? When I did make it home, I looked around to make sure I wasn't followed still. I didn't see anybody. A few days later, I worked another later shift. I got off once again at roughly 10 p.m. This night, I had been working a long time, and I wasn't thinking about the guy that I had seen the last time. He wasn't there, though. I started walking home on the sidewalk like I always did. When I made it to the end of the sidewalk on the first street, I turned and then started to go into the residential area. The streets were much darker, and there were not as many lights around. I walked past an apartment building first, and then there were many different other houses. All I had to do was walk to the end of this street, take a left, go 2 blocks, and then I was home. When I was walking past the apartment building, I thought I heard a noise. I looked over after hearing it. I saw that next to the apartment building there was a tree, and I thought I saw a guy sort of behind the tree. It was like he was hiding. His head was looking between 2 large branches. The tree was probably 15 feet away and really obstructed. I could still tell that it was the same guy I had seen a few nights earlier who was hiding behind it though. I looked away immediately and kept walking. When I did, I was really worried that I would hear him walk on the sidewalk behind me. Luckily, I didn't though. I walked as fast as I could back home. When I was back, I told my parents about the situation. They agreed to drive me to and from work after that. Only a few weeks later, I finally had enough money to buy a car, and from then on, I drove to and from work. I never walked to work again, and I never saw the guy again after that either. If I had to guess, I would say that he lived in those apartment buildings. That must have been how he had seen me walking home from work every single night. It really creeps me out that he probably saw me walk home many times without me knowing, especially the way that he was hiding behind the tree watching me. This happened a couple of months ago. It was a weekend afternoon, and I was really hungry. I went to the nearby Chick-fil-A, which is one of my favorite restaurants. I was really craving it, but when I got there, I saw that they were very busy. The line in the drive-thru was literally going out of the parking lot, so I decided to park and then walk inside. Sometimes this is faster than the drive-thru in my experiences. When I got inside, I saw that there was a long line in there too. Lots of people were inside, and I got in line at the back. The line started moving up, and I was getting closer to ordering, but about a minute after I got there, somebody got in line behind me. When they did, they got uncomfortably close. I felt like they were invading my personal space. I could tell that it was a man and that he was really tall, but I didn't turn around and look at him. When the line moved up, he did too, and he remained a really close distance away from me. He wouldn't move, and it was kind of annoying. I didn't want to be rude and tell him to back up, but he was probably less than a foot away from me. I inched closer to the people in front of me. When I did, the guy seemed to move up as well. Within 2 minutes probably, it was already my turn to order. I walked up to the register and finally away from the guy. I ordered and then walked over and waited. As I was waiting, I looked around casually. I saw the guy who had been standing so close to me. It had to be him. There was only one really tall guy there. He was standing about 10 feet away from me now. As soon as I looked at him, I saw that he was already looking at me. I then looked away. The guy had kind of big glasses and short hair. Several of us were just standing around waiting for food. When my name was called, I went up, got the food, and then left. All of my frustration from the guy being really close to me and staring at me was now gone. I was just really excited to finally eat. When I walked out the door though, somebody walked out right behind me. When I got outside, I noticed who it was. The tall guy that was standing really close to me. He didn't even have any food in his hands. As I walked to my car in the parking lot, the guy walked right behind me.
I unlocked my door, and as I was getting inside, I saw the man go to the car right next to mine. That was his car. I started my engine, and he started his. I sat there waiting for him to back up first, but he didn't. He looked over at me a couple of times, I could tell, but I didn't look over at him. I didn't want to see him. After maybe 2 or 3 minutes, both of us just sitting there in our running cars, I turned mine off. I was kind of concerned at this point, and I thought maybe the guy would try to follow me home or something weird. After turning my car off, I opened the door and got out. There was a Target store right by the Chick-fil-A. In fact, their parking lots connected. I figured I could walk in there and maybe lose the guy. I really didn't think he would follow me inside still. But when I started walking to the Target, he got out of his car and started following me. I made it about halfway through the Target parking lot and then looked behind me and saw the guy was still right there. He was maybe 10 feet away. I was frustrated and really tired of this guy. I took a few more normal steps and then turned around, and out of nowhere, I sprinted all the way back to my car. I looked behind me to see if the man would sprint as well. He turned around and faced me, but looked confused and did not chase after me. I kept running though. I'm sure if anybody saw me, they thought that I was really weird, but I didn't care. I made it back to my car, started it up, and left. I was able to make it home just fine without being followed. I don't think I have been to that Chick-fil-A ever since. I don't know what that guy's deal was either. How long would he have followed me, and what would he have done? I used to work at a Chick-fil-A. This was about 5 years ago now. One night, I worked until close. We were pretty busy that night, but by the final hour of work, the restaurant was basically empty. All of the customers were in the drive-thru. We had a couple here and there come inside, but not too many. I had been working, taking customers' orders. When it was just about time to close, I got out the mop to clean the floors. This is something that I often did as we were closing. I would clean the dining area and make sure that any customers knew that we were closing, if there were any. There appeared to be nobody in the dining room as I mopped. But then, as I looked around, I thought I saw a man. We had a play place at our location in the back of the dining room area. It looked as though there was a guy hiding in the play place. There was like a toy car that you could go inside, and it was connected at the top of the slides and other things that kids could play on. I could see the man's head looking out from the car window, then he ducked down. I was not happy to see this. As I mopped the floor, I hoped that the guy would leave, but it was clear that he wasn't planning on it. I decided that I would have to go over and tell the man that he had to get out of here. Adults were not supposed to be in the play place, first of all, and second, we were closing. I walked over and into the play place. I couldn't see the man at all now. When I got to the structure, I called out, asking if the guy was okay. I got no answer. I moved back and looked to the window of the toy car again. I saw a man's face briefly appear for just a second. Then, he ducked down and out of sight quickly. I said that we were closing now and everybody had to leave. Still nothing. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I decided to go back and tell my 2 coworkers who were still here what was going on. When I got back to the front counter area and was walking behind it, I heard some noise. I looked and saw a guy running out of the front door of the restaurant. I was glad to see him leave. I really didn't know what he was doing in there. After that, I finished up mopping the floors. Then I left. As I was walking out to my car, I saw the guy again. He was standing near the building on the end. When I looked in his direction, he quickly moved to around the corner. I left after that. I've always wondered what that man was trying to do, hiding inside. Was he planning to rob the place after we closed? That's my best guess. I also don't know why he was still hanging around afterwards. It was very mysterious.
Ever since I first went to Chick-fil-A, it's been one of my favorite restaurants. I've always loved their chicken sandwiches, and their sauce always hits the spot. However, the college that I recently graduated from is in an area where there's no Chick-fil-A nearby, so when I was at school, I could never have it. Last year, when the semester finally came to an end, I was driving back home to get to my parents' house, and I had the idea to get Chick-fil-A. I left my school in the morning, and it was a 4-hour drive to get back home. When I got about an hour away from home, my cravings got the better of me and I saw a Chick-fil-A and stopped. It was a Chick-fil-A that I had never been to before, but it looked relatively new and was very busy. I got in the drive-thru line, which was long but moving fast.
I ordered the number one, which is what I usually got, of a chicken sandwich, fries, and a drink. I was so hungry that I decided to park and eat it there. The Chick-fil-A was in a large shopping area that had a mall with a really big parking lot connected to it, so I drove to an open area of the mall parking lot that wasn't very busy. I started to eat, but before long I was kind of annoyed with the way that the sun was shining right into my front window onto me. I moved parking spaces down to where there was a shady spot near a tree. As I backed up my car out of the spot and started to drive, I saw that there was another car that was parked a little ways away from me that started to leave at the same time. I drove over and parked next to a tree, and the car followed me and parked about 10 spots away from me. I found it odd, but overall was more focused on eating. A while later, when I decided to continue with my drive home, I had forgotten all about the car and started to drive away. But when I did, I noticed the car start to drive with me. I never bothered to look to see who was driving it, and it was too far away to tell by this point. I once again found it odd, but what could I do? I got back on the road and then merged onto the freeway that was close by. I noticed the entire time that the car that was seemingly following me did the same. I got kind of worried when I saw this. I wondered why someone would follow me. Had I accidentally cut him off or something before? I kept on driving down the road and the car remained behind me the entire time. I tried some things like slowing down or changing lanes, but he kept following me. I still couldn't really tell much about how the driver looked because I still wasn't able to get a very good look at him. The closer I got to home, the more concerned I became because I didn't want to go all the way home and have this guy potentially know where I live. When I got about 10 minutes away from home, I decided to pull off the highway again and take the exit. I didn't really have much of a plan, but I knew I shouldn't go to my house with somebody following me. There was a little town that had a few stores and gas stations. I pulled into the parking lot of a supermarket and parked in a spot in the back where there weren't many other cars. Of course, the car that was following me did as well. I got out my phone and called my parents. I was going to tell them that I had been followed and ask them what to do, but before I could finish telling them, I saw that the car had parked in a spot behind me and a few spaces to the left. I noticed that the driver's door of the car opened, and both passengers' doors in the back did as well. I saw 3 large men all get out of the car and start heading towards me. In this moment, as they approached my car, I panicked and slammed my foot on the gas pedal and sped away. I saw the men then stop and begin to run back to their car. This is where I got lucky in a way. There happened to be a police car that was driving on the quiet road connecting the supermarket with other businesses. When he saw me speeding away in an almost reckless way, he pulled me over. The car that was following me slowed down too, but then drove away. When the officer got to my window, he told me I was driving a little wild, and I told him my situation. He then gave me just a warning to slow down and drive safer, and offered to drive behind me for a few miles to make sure that I wasn't followed. I took him up on the offer, and luckily I was able to make it home safely without ever seeing that car again. I still wonder sometimes, though, why that car was following me for so long, and what the men wanted. This story happened about a year ago. I was at Chick-fil-A with my girlfriend one night. It was one of both of our favorite restaurants, and we would get it all the time. Usually we would go through the drive-thru, but tonight we decided to eat inside the restaurant. It was a little bit later at night, and not very many other people were there at all. We sat in a booth on the far side of the restaurant, and were all by ourselves for the most part. We were eating, joking around, and just having normal conversation, when all of a sudden I heard a banging at the window right in front of me. We were sitting by the window, so I was super startled. Because it was dark out and the way the window was, I couldn't really see out of it very well at first, but when I looked, I saw a man. There was a guy who looked pretty mean. He was angrily banging on the glass right in front of us. My girlfriend and I were both pretty startled, and we watched the man to see what his problem was. He started to yell something at us, but I couldn't understand what he was yelling. The man wore a dark sweatshirt with the hood up and appeared to wear glasses and have a brown goatee. I don't know if he was insane or what, because I certainly hadn't done anything to make him angry. The man then suddenly stopped yelling and turned his back on us, then sprinted away into the night. My girlfriend and I both looked at each other in shock. "What was that?" she asked. I figured the guy was insane or on drugs or something like that, but we were both just glad that he was gone. Like many Chick-fil-A's, it was next to multiple businesses, so we figured he had come from one of those. We both talked about it for a few minutes, and then were ready to go back home. I had to use the bathroom, so I told my girlfriend that I would be right back and then we would leave. I walked inside the bathroom into the urinal and did my business. As I was in there, though, I remember seeing someone was using one of the stalls in the men's room. When I was done, I got to the sink and began washing my hands when I heard the stall door start to open. I casually looked over to see who was coming out. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the same man who had been outside. He stopped in his place and just stared at me. Then, slowly, a really wide and creepy grin came over his face. I didn't waste any time and quickly left the bathroom as fast as I could. I saw my girlfriend was waiting for me by the door, and she could see the panic on my face. She asked me what was wrong, and I just told her we had to go. I didn't pay any attention to if the man followed us or not. When we got to the car, I told my girlfriend about how I had seen the man in the bathroom. She was really shocked to hear this, and we drove home after that. Thankfully, we never saw the man again. What was the most crazy thing is that we had a view of the only entrance to the restaurant the entire time, and we never saw the man come inside the door. I don't know how he was suddenly inside the bathroom, but thinking about it gives me the creeps. I worked at a Chick-fil-A a few years back. This was the weirdest thing to ever happen. When I worked there, I would oftentimes be at the drive-thru window handing customers their food. On one day, I don't remember the exact day of the week, but I know it was a weekday. Things were not all that busy and it was in the afternoon. I remember we had a lot of cars in the drive-thru and I dealt with many different people. At one point though, I recognized a man that I was handing food to. He had been there not long ago. It was a little weird, but I gave him his food and moved on. Then I saw him again about 20 minutes later. This time, he only ordered a drink. I gave it to him and he left, only to come back again 10 minutes later ordering another drink. This time, I jokingly made a comment to the man that he was here again, but the man denied it. He claimed this was his first time there and I was wrong. He also didn't seem very friendly at all. He kind of said it in a rude way. I gave him his drink and he left. I didn't see him for another 30 minutes or so, but then he came back again. This time, he just got a water. Every time he would come back, he would seemingly order just one small thing. I was really confused by this behavior. He came back several more times, getting small items each time, and he seemed angry as well. It was one of the strangest things that I had seen. I got off of work that night, and on my way home had to stop at the store to get a couple of things. I was in the store for no longer than 5 minutes, when suddenly I saw the same man walking down an aisle about 20 feet away. He didn't seem to notice me. I thought this was an insane coincidence, and I felt kind of creeped out because of just how crazy it was. I ended up leaving the store shortly after, and in the coming days I forgot about the man for the most part. But less than a week later, I was at my house taking out the trash when I saw the same man once again. This time he was walking down my street. I lived in a fairly big neighborhood, but I had never seen him prior to being at the Chick-fil-A. I felt really creeped out and went back inside. I'm not sure if the man saw me or not, but after that occurrence, I've never seen the man since. I just think it's really creepy how all that happened. Sometimes I wonder if he was stalking me or something like that. In fact, it's so crazy that a lot of people don't believe me when I tell them the story, but I know what happened. Either way, I'm glad I haven't seen the man since. I'm a female who used to work at Chick-fil-A when I was in my late teens and early 20s. Overall, it was a fun place to work and I made lots of friends. Everyone who worked there was super nice, which is why I stayed working there for so long. However, at one point we hired a new guy named Justin. From the day he started working there, Justin just seemed like a jerk. He was rude and selfish and would do things like go on his phone during shifts, take really long bathroom breaks, and leave early. I found out he was a relative to one of our managers, and as a favor to his family, she was able to get him a job. He was a somewhat troubled guy who had gotten into some problems before, but it was thought that the job would help him out. For the first few weeks, though, it didn't. For the most part, when I first met him, though, he was rather nice to me. Shortly after that, he asked me out during his shift though. He basically asked what I was doing and if I wanted to hang out or go someplace with him. I really didn't want to and told him that I was busy. Over the next few times that we worked together, he remained persistent and would ask me to hang out after work or something like that almost every time. When I would say no or come up with excuses, he would seem to grow increasingly angry. I also heard from another female worker that he had been doing the same to her. He was a bigger guy, almost looked like a football player as he was over 6 feet tall with very short hair and strong looking. One night, he asked me to hang out after work as he saw me clocking out for my lunch break. I told him no again, but this time he grabbed my arm. He asked me why in a very serious and frustrated tone. I told him I was sorry, but I just really didn't want to. The way he aggressively grabbed me made me kind of worried, and I decided in that moment I would have to talk to my boss because I had really had enough of him. The rest of my shift was really busy, and as it was time for dinner, we had a big rush. I didn't get a chance to speak with my boss, Christine, and I even forgot about the situation. Finally, after things quieted down and we were no longer busy, my shift was over and it was time for me to go home. I clocked out and then got my coat and headed for my car. As I approached my car, I suddenly saw somebody jump out from behind it. Where I was parked, it was at the back side of the restaurant that was bordering a grassy area with a couple of trees. I saw the person who had jumped out was Justin. I was really surprised to see him. He said to me that I had no reason to dislike him and asked me what my problem was. I told him I really didn't have a problem with him, I just wanted to go home. He was standing blocking my driver's door, and I knew it would be hard for me to get around him. I asked him if he should get back to work. He then told me that he was off and he had been off for 2 hours just waiting for me. Obviously, this creeped me out even more. He then stepped towards me and grabbed my arm again. When he did, he shoved me in the opposite direction. There was a car parked 2 spaces away, and I guess it was his because I heard it unlock. He then shoved me to the car and told me to get inside. I asked him why. He said he just wanted to talk. When he said this, his voice seemed to lighten up. I figured maybe I could have an actual conversation with him and let him know he needed to leave me alone and these things are not okay. I reluctantly got inside the car. Justin shut the door and then walked around and got inside to the driver's seat. But instead of talking to me, he immediately started up the car and began backing out. He also locked all of the doors in the process. Right away, I got a terrible feeling. I asked him what he was doing. He said to shut up and then cursed at me. He then went on a short rant about how he hated working and how he had just quit. As he did this, the car started to speed up and he merged onto a busier road. I knew I was in trouble and took out my phone from my pocket and immediately went to dial 911. Justin saw me doing this, and I was just barely able to hit call on my phone. I could hear the ringing on the other end, but no more than a couple of seconds of this, and Justin reached over and grabbed my phone. He yelled at me and we wrestled over the phone for a couple of seconds. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull it away from him fast enough. He got control of my phone and then rolled down his window and tossed the phone out onto the side of the road. He then kept on driving. I was terrified. I knew that I could no longer call for help and decided that I had to try to think of something to do. Justin just kept on driving down the road at a really fast speed. None of us said a word for several minutes. I was just doing my best to think about what I could possibly do to try to escape. Then, suddenly I saw the amazing sight of flashing lights behind us. Justin started yelling and cursing, and eventually he pulled over. The police pulled over with him, and as soon as the car stopped, Justin opened his door and took off into the woods. I saw the police officer run after him, and I got out of the car. The officer told me to stay put, and then he called for backup. Eventually, more officers arrived, and a short time later, I heard that they had caught Justin after a foot chase. The police told me they had received a 911 call from my phone, and even though I didn't talk to anyone, they decided to investigate the area the call was made from. They only originally pulled over Justin because he was speeding, but after he took off running, they went after him. I was so grateful that I was all right and got out of that situation. After that, I took some time off of work and eventually returned to work there for a short time more.